Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders, make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Robert Kennedy III, who wants to live in a world where people are no longer afraid to confidently tell their stories, and they can also eat Reese's peanut butter cups for every meal without repercussions. I'm with him on that. His work as a keynote speaker and trainer in the area of leadership communications has led him to work with organizations such as the U.S. Coast Guard, Barnes & Noble, Social Security Administration, Panda Restaurant Group, AARP, and more. He is involved in his community through various boards, including the School Boards, Association for Talent Development of the Maryland chapter, the Youth Leadership Programs, and helping nonprofits conduct mock interviews. Welcome, Robert. It is such a pleasure to have you. Before we dive into your professionally related things, would you just tell us a little more about yourself personally so we can get to know you as a whole person?
I mean, you sure you want to do that? Because there's a whole lot of me. I'm married. I've got 3 kids, one of which is a whole entire adult now. She's
Woo!
moved away from us, and so we've got 2 others, one in college, one on the way to college. What else do I do? I like to be active. I'm competitive. I like to play sports. I like to go to the golf range and see how far I can whack the ball.
Love it.
I love music. I mean, if you could see my office, you'll see a keyboard in here. I like to do a lot of different things. I'm doing an exercise program called 75 Hard right now, so I'm drinking a lot of water. How about that?
I love that. I've heard just a little bit about 75 Hard, but to not digress too much, would you just tell us what it is in a nutshell? Because I do keep hearing about it.
Yeah, so 75 Hard is a mental toughness and physical health program started by Andy Frisella. And if you go to 75hard.com, you can see the information there. But essentially, it's 2 45-minute workouts daily. One's got to be outside. You got to stick to a diet, no alcohol, no cheat days. You got to take a progress photo every day. You got to read 10 pages of a personal development or nonfiction book. And you've got to drink about a gallon of water each day.
I love it. So it is like willpower, like we're going to be healthy, no cheats to make it easy, just make it
Yep.
happen.
75 days. And if you miss a day, you got to start over.
Oh my goodness.
So you can't skip day 8 and then just say, hey, I'm just going to pick up a day 9. Nope. Start over again at 1.
Well, I'm going to use that to segue into storytelling. You're an
Yeah.
expert in storytelling. And I think, especially when it comes to telling your own story, it maybe feels like 75 hard for some people.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about why is storytelling so important? Creating your own signature story. What does that do for people? And then maybe we can go
Right.
into, how do we create a great signature story?
Yeah. So I'll approach this from the organizational standpoint. First of all, people feel like storytelling is hard because you go into organizations and they want the data, they
Right.
want the information. And so people feel like storytelling is this woo woo fluffy, not meaty type of stuff because they're like, no, I don't. And the reason why people don't want to always hear our stories is because a lot of us have lost or suppressed the ability to tell stories effectively. We start to load it with information. So storytelling is important because it humanizes us. It humanizes every organization. People want to know that you are a person that's been through problems, that you've been through challenges with them. You understand where they are because if they know that you know where they are, that you understand and you emotionally can understand what they're going through, then that leads them, that creates connection with you. And when you can create connection, it's easier to create trust.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll pause right there
I
because
I
yeah,
love that. So, like, trust, connection,
yeah,
absolutely. Like, data is important too, but stories contextualize the data. Without a
yeah.
story, it's really our brains are not wired for data.
Nope.
I often refer back to Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a whopper
Mhm.
of a book, but boy, does it drive that point home. Speaking of a story from that book, is telling even like statisticians who are professional statisticians, they're wired for story and they
Yeah.
struggle to interpret data when faced with the real world.
Yeah.
So how do we start to like how do you start to think about telling a great story and pulling that story out of an organization or for an individual leader?
Yeah. So stories really have four main elements: context, characters, conflict, conclusion. Those are the four pillars
Okay,
of
context,
storytelling:
characters,
characters, conflict,
conflict,
and conclusion.
conclusion. Yeah, sounds a little
Right.
bit like
So,
the hero's journey element
yeah.
here. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's every single story.
Yeah.
So in organizations, typically, if we're sharing information, we tell people the conclusion. We start them with the product, the program, the process,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
no.
when you slam them with that, they're not clear on, okay, why does this matter to me?
Yeah.
Right? And so I've got to look at, okay, where do I start in this story so it's going to make a difference? And typically, you want to start with somewhere around the conflict. I've got another framework that I call challenge, catalyst, and change.
Challenge, catalyst,
And
change.
so
Okay.
the challenge is, okay, that's the conflict, the character, and the context all wrapped up into one. What is the audience or the character going through right at this moment? Why does it hurt? Why does
Mm,
it matter? Why does it provide an opportunity of some sort? Right? If
yeah.
if I start there, then I can go into, okay, this is why this matters, and then here's the process or here's the change inside of this. Right? So I'll give you a quick example. I was sitting in my living room. I lived in the state of Massachusetts. I was sitting in my living room. The doorbell rang. And I go and I look out the window, and there's this dude standing in the driveway, and he's got this square display board, was a rectangular display board with these little square pieces of whatever on it. I didn't know what it was at first. So I opened the door. He says, "Hey, my name's Mark. I'm selling carpet. We've got all of these different carpet samples. We've got the Berber, we've got the high pile, the low pile, the Gomer pile." If you recognize that example, I know how old you are. All right. we got all of these different piles of carpet. And he said, "Come on and touch them." I touched the carpet, and after a little while, he looks in my door and recognizes that my entire home is hardwood.
Mm,
So
mm.
he looks and he says, "Oh yeah, you got hardwood. All right, I'll see you later." And he leaves. So what he did was he just rammed or slammed me with the product, and he didn't know what I needed or if I didn't need something.
Yeah.
Here's a different approach he could have taken.
Okay.
He could have come over, rang my doorbell, and said, "Hey, my name's Mark. I just came from your neighbor Judy just now, and we were talking a little bit, and she was telling me that she absolutely hates oil heating because the bill is really, really high. I noticed that you've got an oil tank outside. Are you on the same page with Judy? Is Judy telling the truth?" And I'd be like, "Yes, my gosh, my oil bill is astronomical. I wish I could do something about it." He could then say, "Well, you know what? I've got an idea. Have you ever heard of surface or area rugs. If you put area rugs in a specific place in your home, even if you've got hardwood, it can make a change, or your heating bill can go down a little bit. That's a different approach,
Yeah.
right? He's told me a story, he's created a connection, didn't take a long time, and he got an emotional reaction out of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like in that example, I love it. He made you the central character of the story.
Right.
Like, cause you're thinking, you're
Right.
like, oh yeah. I love
Yeah.
to I think you shared some great just now examples of telling an engaging story. I heard you add in details, sitting in my living room and the doorbell rings and my brain goes ding dong, like
Yeah.
I'm right in story mode. Like you set the stage, giving me enough visual details to like really come into the story with you and join you
Yeah.
there. And also you kind of pre-framed it with, you let me know I'm in story mode. And we all, I think, love being in story mode. We know that from like our childhoods, once upon a time. It's like, okay,
Right.
settle in for a good story. You've got my full attention.
Yeah.
So, can you break down some of those elements for us about like when presenting your story? So, we talked about like what goes into a good story, what goes into great story presentation.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So you brought up some of them with me giving you that settling in moment. And I didn't say, I'm going to tell you a story now.
Right.
I said, hey, let me give you an example. I set it up and then I said, let me give you an example. So in starting the example, I want to do a couple of things, which you've already alluded to. I want to get you out of looking at me and I want you to look inside your own brain. I want you to start creating a video and playing a video or an image, painting a picture in your mind. So I start with, I'm sitting in my living room. I'm using language that says, okay, there's an action that I'm familiar with. I know what people look like when they sit. Let me imagine a person sitting. There's this guy in front of me. Okay, let me imagine him sitting. I'm sitting in my living room and I hear my doorbell ring, an action word.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to do the sound effect?
Yeah.
Ding
Ding
dong. Okay,
dong.
so I sprint over to the window and I pull the curtain back and I peek outside. And I'm using the action. I'm tilting
Yeah.
my head.
Yeah.
Say, okay,
I'm
yep,
right
I'm
with
peeking
you.
outside.
Like,
Right. So I'm describing the story vividly in terms of color. I'm describing it in terms of action, what I'm doing. I'm describing it in terms of movement from one location to the next. And then I look outside and I see this gentleman in my driveway with a rectangular, I tell you the shape,
mhm.
board with some small, tell you the size objects. So I'm giving you some emotional details because what's happening, every word that I'm sharing, your brain doesn't like open loops.
Yeah.
So what your brain is doing with every sentence or every paragraph, your brain is running through its mental database. I used to say mental Rolodex, but I don't know if people know that term anymore. But your brain is skipping through its mental Rolodex saying, hey, do I recognize this? Is this an experience I want to have? Have I had this already? Do I not want to have this? What's pain involved in that? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So your brain is going through that and it's making these connections. Think, 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 think. It's making these connections. And so as a presenter, I want that. I want
Yeah.
that. And so I'm careful about painting the picture to allow the audience to do that. And then when I painted the picture, I get to a certain point, I ask a question.
Mhm.
Here's a here is a brain science theory, a brain process. Our brains go through this process known as instinctive elaboration.
Mm.
And here's what that means. Anytime a question is asked, your brain can't help but answer it.
Yeah. I know this one from marketing because if you ever
Yeah.
need a great headline, a
Yep.
cheat, a very
Yep.
effective cheat is just make it a
Yep.
question because it
Yeah.
stops people's brains. They're like, oh, question, gotta answer it,
Yep.
like
Gotta answer it.
squirrel.
Cheat code. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're speaking, you're doing a presentation and you want to hijack a person's brain immediately, ask a good question.
Yeah.
Yes or no questions are okay.
Yeah.
But if you ask a question like, what did it feel like the last time you experienced this?
Mm.
Or where were you when X happened?
Mhm. Yeah.
The mind is like, okay, ding, 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 let me start making those connections. Let me find that information and bring it up so I can see if I liked it, if I connect with it, if there's an emotion that I have attached to it. Right. So, as a speaker, as a presenter, as a leader
Yeah.
in an organization, you want to go into a boardroom and you want to engage people,
Yeah.
start with a question that allows them to go back into their brain because now you've made them the character. They've created some context because they are looking for the experience. And you've created the challenge because, or you've helped to identify the challenge because they're saying, okay, what happened when that happened? Did I like that? Was that hurtful? Was it a great experience? Was I excited? And they're making these connections. So once you can do that with a person, then you can say, okay, well, if you've experienced this, how about this? Here's a way to walk through that.
Yeah.
Here's a product. Here's a process. Here's a program that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So you can use stories to capture people's minds. And you mentioned the
Yeah.
word as a leader. I'd love to go through some ways to use stories as a leader. There's the what is hopefully obvious at this point, which is
Yeah.
you can use stories to help you fundraise. And that's important. And people still need to learn about that. And I do want to talk about that. But I
Yeah.
also love to talk about some of the many other ways, you can use storytelling to lead your staff, to lead your board, to lead people in your programs, to lead people
Yeah.
into your programs, all of those things. I'd love to really in this episode just kind of crack that wide open that, because I
Yeah.
think I feel a theme emerging of like, storytelling is a form of mind control. It's a way to like get into somebody's brain and make it
Yeah.
do the things you want it to do. And
Yeah.
when used ethically, that is a very good tool to have as a leader. So
Yeah.
let's go there wherever you want to start.
Yeah. So there are three main stories. As I'm working with leaders, there are three main stories that I share with them. There is the personal story,
Mhm.
there is the origin story, and there is the brand or strategic story. So a personal story is something that happened to me,
Yeah.
an event or an experience that I had. As a leader, maybe it was when I first started working and I was on a project and the project was going super fast and I totally blew it. I
Yeah.
failed at it. I didn't understand how to do certain things. You might be experiencing a staff member or a teammate who is struggling and mentally they're not connecting the dots and they're feeling overwhelmed like they're underperforming. As a leader, you can share a story like, "Listen, I've been there. Dude, this is what happened to me my first 3 years in the business. I look
Yeah.
like an overnight success. No, it took me
No.
15 years to do this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's a personal story. An origin story is can be a personal and it can be also organizational. There's a
Mm.
company called Warby Parker.
Mhm.
If you're familiar with glasses
Eyeglasses,
or
right?
eyewear,
Yep.
yeah. On their website, on their about page, they tell the story of how Warby Parker started. Some college kids went on a camping trip for a weekend. They decided that they were going to go on a hike, and during the hike, one of the students dropped their glasses. Somebody stepped on it, the glasses broke. All right. They got back to the camping trip. The person couldn't really see that well. They went back to college and went back to their classes and they struggled to see the board. They were squinting and they couldn't buy glasses because the eyewear was super expensive and they couldn't afford them. And so they made the decision that they were going to create a business where eyewear was
Mm.
never going to be unaffordable for somebody who needed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the origin. That's our why, right?
Yeah.
Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
how great leaders inspire action. Start with why. That's the
Yeah.
why we do what we do,
So I
right? And
have
if you want to align, go ahead.
I'm completely, following along and in agreement. I have kind of an advanced question for you. If we don't have
Let's
time
go.
for it, that's okay. But um
Yeah.
cuz I origin stories are so powerful. And I think, when you
Mhm.
say like that's our why.
Right.
How do we work through situations where maybe we have a really old organization and they've kind of evolved beyond their like forming origin story, but of course they
Right.
still have a why. Like, what are some things for those folks to be thinking about as their origin story?
Well, so you always have an origin story, but one of the reasons why we have customer testimonials
Mm.
or why we have stories of how we've helped customers or helped people recently,
Mhm.
that is an up to date or now current relevant piece of or an update to the
Yeah.
why. The why we started, why we did this originally, that's still existent.
Yeah. Yeah.
The company could be 150 years old. We started here and that was our core purpose, our core mission. I want to show you that 150 years later, we have not deviated from that
Yeah.
because here are 5 customers that have reported to us based on our product or process or our partnerships over the last 5 years that we have done this, or here's how we've helped them. And
Yeah.
you lead with those, or you make sure that those stories are front and center
Yeah. I
so
love
that
that.
people
So,
can say, this is not old. This is okay. This just happened. Yes, it's
yeah,
still relevant.
still relevant. And what I hear you saying is, the core of the why, and I
Mhm.
found this very much true. The oldest organization I worked with was 125 years old.
Right.
No, maybe I worked with one older, but we were revisiting their mission, and the core of their why was still very much the same. The what about and
Right.
how that they
Hmm.
did with their why had changed
Yeah.
significantly, but the core why, this was an organization that worked with children, which was the core of their why, was that young children benefit greatly from education. Basically, like,
Yeah.
it is important that children receive education starting from a young age, and they were an organization that was deeply involved. Originally, their original what was for the formation of kindergarten in the United States. Their present day what is not related to kindergarten, and they're international, but that core why was still very much the same. So I've seen that to be
Yeah.
true. That's just one example, and I think that's a great way to, like, leading with the testimonials of what is the current day expression of that why look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, and there was a third one. So we have your personal story, we have your origin story, and we
Mhm.
have your
I would say the brand or strategic stories. So the brand or strategic stories, I break down into 3 areas as well: the process, the product, or a partnership. So a process would be how you solved a specific problem, a list of steps, the experience that happened when you encountered a specific challenge
yeah.
and what you did as a company, as a person, as a unit, as a department to solve that. And that process might have been something brand new that came out of the fact that that challenge existed,
Yeah.
right? And that's a strategic story. You might tell that type of a story when people hit a roadblock.
Mm,
You have a
mhm.
project that you're on and they hit a roadblock and you say, okay, well, last time this happened, here's what we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So that is process oriented. Now, you've also got the product story. And the product story is how a specific item solves a challenge. That might
Mm,
be internally or that might be externally, right? And this is why we have commercials. Commercials are strategic stories that are product based.
right. Yeah.
How does this skincare, how does this particular brand of lotion help somebody over 50 to get rid of, I don't know, freckles or age
Right,
spots or
right.
or whatever it is.
And that's
Okay, how does it help a teenager get rid of a pimple or
right.
acne, yeah, whatever it is,
I love that
right?
you use the example of skincare, and if you've ever
Yeah.
met a marketer who worked with skincare, and there's a famous one who I think worked with, was it Proactive? And he was just
Yeah.
like all skin lotion, he's like, "It's the same formula." Like, again, there is
Right.
nothing unique about the formula. It is
Right.
all story to differentiate one cream from another, because,
Yeah.
some of them might say they have a special ingredient, but he was like, "Really? They are all the same, and they basically all get the same results."
Yeah. Yep.
It is story that brings them alive and makes them
Yeah.
meaningful solutions.
Yep.
I love that. I love
Yep.
that example.
Yep.
Um, I want to kind of go into that, that story behind the process. I know I have pretty advanced processes now. Well, I shouldn't say advanced. The more expert you become, the simpler the processes become, but they have
Right.
names and they're, I've used them so many times. But I remember when I was first, before I developed the impact method, I had a basic process for solving problems with clients. And literally, like, my sales process would be I would listen to the client, I would ask them questions to understand their problem, and then I'd kinda lean back and be like, "That is a hard problem. I don't know the answer, but I have this process that
Mhm.
figures out the answer, and so far it's worked, like, every time I use it. So, do you wanna, like, work together and give it a try?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And that was powerful, and it worked really well too because it was refreshing. Because so many consultants out there be like, "I'll tell you the answer," and you kinda don't believe them because 'cause you're like, "Yeah, you'll heard my problem for, like, 10 minutes or an hour,
Right.
like, how can you know the answer already?" And I believe in some cases you can know the answer because when you become an expert, complex situations start to look simpler to you. But
Yeah.
the lesson, just for, our leaders out there is just because you can see the answer doesn't mean it serves everybody. You still have to bring
Mm.
everybody else along. So knowing the answer actually isn't that useful because you have to get everybody else to learn that answer too. And so often it is through story and experience and getting people to, like, I'm realizing as we're having this conversation, a piece of secret sauce in my coaching is getting people to tell the stories about their own experiences in a way that
Yeah.
they go, "Oh, I just learned something that helps me move forward, to the
Yeah.
next phase of the story."
Yeah. And stories trigger memory as well. There is a book by, gosh, I forget the guy's name, but he shares in that book that stories help to create memory by about 22 times. They did a study
Mm,
with some college student,
yeah.
and you're more likely to remember a fact if it's based in a story. As a matter of fact, when I talk about storytelling and connection, I have a slide on my screen and they're like 20 words. And I say, okay, everybody, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to memorize all of these words in order. And they can, oh my God. And some people are trying to take out their phone. No screenshots. Nope, you got to remember it. And I give them about 20 seconds or so. Then I shut the screen off and then I say, okay, who can tell me the words? And people say, okay, stairs, door, Gmail. And so then I say, okay, listen, I'm gonna let you off the hook. What if I told you every morning I get up, I come down the stairs, I come to my office, and I open up my Gmail, I click the plus button to compose an email. I spend about 10 minutes doing that. Then I open up my CRM and I walk through the process. So they're kind of like, okay, yep, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, all the
Right.
things
But
in
I
the
couldn't
story.
remember the list of words because they were just random.
Yeah, absolutely, and there was a great book I read years ago, I think it was called Moonwalking with Einstein. It's all about
Mhm.
ways to, like, remember things, and it's all
Yeah.
about, like, you basically, if you wanna remember something, you create a visual story about it in your head,
Yeah.
and you literally, I mean, this is now a somewhat well-known tactic, but, like, you create, they call them, I think, memory palaces, like, you create
Yeah.
physical locations, and then you store memories, like, in rooms, in drawers, visually, with a little
Yeah.
story behind them, and some, the more ridiculous it is, the easier it sticks, right?
Yeah.
But if we want people to remember what we've said, like, this is really relevant. Like, maybe you want to stand out in a donor's mind, so when they're thinking about, "Where am I giving now or next?" You are top of mind. Maybe you're trying to get a staff member or a team of staff members to adapt a new process or a new way of doing things, right? Like, you've got to have
Yeah.
something a little exciting in their brain to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do the new thing," right? As opposed to like, "Oh, I got to do that new thing." I have a new, just kind of mini story I've been telling myself, a friend and colleague who was actually just on this podcast. We were having lunch and talking about like how we were building relationships. And I was complimenting her. I'm like, you're so good at like reaching out to people who like you're on their email list and engaging them in a conversation. Like, how do you do it? What's your secret? And she said something like, well, when I come across a stranger who I like, I think, oh, a stranger, I want to go talk to them. And I was like, oh, that's not what I think when I see a stranger. I'm like, oh, stranger, scary. Like, they're not going to like me. I don't want to talk to them. But now, like, I hear her voice. I'm like, I just have this visual, textual memory of the lunch and her face and the excitement. I'm like, I want to adopt that emotional
Yeah.
reaction when I see a stranger, and it starts to work. Like, you remember the experience, and my brain is now starting to go, oh, stranger, I want to talk
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. 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 It's powerful. Stories are powerful and memorable, and people who tell stories, especially people who tell good stories, they're just more interesting. you just gotta want to hang out with them more. And so, as leaders, as nonprofit leaders, at the very minimum, you don't want to bore the heck out of your people.
Yeah,
So become
totally.
more interesting by capturing stories. Part of the reason, I'll bring this up, part of the reason a lot of leaders or people do not tell more stories is because they're not sure what story to tell
Mm,
or if they have a story to tell.
yeah.
There's a great book by Matthew Dix called Story Worthy. And inside of that book, he talks about this practice of at the end of each day, gets a sheet of paper and he writes down 5 things that happened that day. Doesn't matter what they are.
Yep.
I stopped at the gas station to get gas. I went in the store and my wife asked me to get some potatoes, but I got potatoes, cheese, and granola bars. Okay, cool. That's what happened. Yeah, so I do that all the time. My wife sends me for one
Yeah.
thing, I get 6.
Yeah.
All right.
That would be me too. Yeah.
So he writes those down, and then he draws a line, and beside each of those stories or those each of those experiences, he writes, what was a lesson that I learned, or what is a takeaway that I could have from
Mhm.
that experience. What that does is, number one, it gets you in the habit of capturing what seem to be mundane events
Yeah.
during your day. And then after you've captured the event, you get in the practice of assigning meaning to those events. And the more that you do that, number one, the more meaningful life becomes. Number two, you get in the practice of looking at more intently at all of the different events that are happening in your day. And then you're able to pull from those. Somebody says something to you, or they present a challenge to you. You immediately say, you know what? I wrote this down yesterday.
Yeah.
This simple thing happened. Here's how that relates to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. I love that example. I love the way you taught it. It makes it really accessible to just think
Yeah.
about like what is the meaning. I've heard a similar lesson before, and one of the bonus things is of doing that, I think, is that mundane stuff, which and
Mhm.
I'm telling myself this lesson as much as I'm saying it to the audience, that mundane stuff is interesting and
Yeah.
memorable to other people because it makes you relatable. Like the person I first kind of heard a very similar framework in teaching it, they told this story about making almond milk at home. Like, I could recall, like, all these details and, like, like, the point was about telling stories, but I remember so
Yeah.
much about almond milk, and I actually went and tried making homemade almond milk because I was like, "This sounds so fun," but it is relatable. People do wanna hear that what to you feels mundane and unshareable makes you interesting and human
Yeah.
and approachable. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a win-win to do that. I'm gonna have to practice that
Yeah.
in my day. There are lessons and stories all around us.
Mhm.
We have to wrap up, but I kind of want to put in a plug for you and all other story coaches out there and share with our audience, especially as a leader of an organization, creating these like stories, like your brand story and your origin story. And you might have an origin story as a leader too, or as an
Yeah.
expert in your field as part of your personal brand. These things don't just like magically appear suddenly. Like the people who tell these great stories, like I've worked through stories with coaches and we wrote versions and they helped me pick what it was going to be and pulled out the details and we practiced how I would give it. And then I gave it again and again and worked it into webinars and talks. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily happen overnight. So I just want to encourage everybody out there listening to take investing in these stories seriously. Like you should think of it as developing an asset, just like you would develop your website or develop your marketing messaging or develop
Yeah.
relationships with donors and develop programming. Developing stories is important and I think worth investing in. So with that
Yeah.
said, for those folks who are interested in learning more about working with you, what kind of folks do you love working with? What's the best way for folks to reach out and learn more about your work?
I love it. So who do I work with? I typically work with emerging mid-tier leaders and business owners, teaching them how to tell their stories on stage and on video so that they can, of course, attract their ideal audience and ultimately generate a bit more income and influence. So you can find me at robertkennedy3.me. Later this month, I'm actually doing something called a Story Vault Remix. And what that is we're spending about 90 minutes together. I'll be sharing some prompts with people. I'll be asking you to pull some stories from your life that may be mundane, that you didn't remember. And then once you've pulled those out, we're going to share with you some frameworks for how you can incorporate those into your presentations, into your conversations, and into your interactions.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Robert. Such a pleasure to have you here. And thank you out there for listening and everything you do to make our communities better. Take a moment today to think about something mundane you did and what lesson you learned from it. And maybe just tell that story to somebody, even if it's your mom or your spouse or your child or your
Yeah.
journal, whatever it is, flex that muscle a little and get it done. And if you can take a moment to respond, review, rate, share this podcast with someone who would benefit from it, that will help our whole community. And until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.